Welcome to USC Rossier's Leadership Month and today's webinar, Diverse Pathways in Educational Leadership. Before we begin, I would like to review the process for submitting a question for our panelists. Please type your question in the Q&A box that can be accessed by clicking on the Q&A icon located at the bottom of your screen. We have reserved time towards the end of the webinar for your questions and hope to get to as many as possible. We also received a number of questions via the registration form and have tried to incorporate as many of them as possible into our structured Q&A at the beginning of this session. If you are planning to share your experience at today's session on social media, we encourage you to use the Leadership Month hashtag #RossierLeads, which appears at the top of the screen. Lastly, please note a recording of this webinar will be available in the next few days and a link will be sent via email. And now I would like to introduce our moderator. Stefanie Phillips earned her EdD from USC Rossier in 2005 and currently serves as the Chief Executive Officer of the Chamberlin Family Foundation. And at this point, I will turn the session over to you, Stefanie.
Thank you, Matt. I'm really excited to be moderating this panel today because not only was my experience one that is diverse and non-traditional, the folks that you're going to hear from today have shown tremendous innovation, creativity, and authenticity in their leadership and their choices around using their gifts to go in different directions rather than just your traditional teaching path. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Anna Becker. She received her MAT in 2018 and currently serves as a curator of community conversation for the Los Angeles Zoo. Welcome, Anna. Next we have Dr. Catalina Lara. She received an MPA from USC in 1996 and then came back for another dose and received her doctorate in education in 2015. She currently serves as the education coordinator for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Welcome, Catalina. And last but not least, we have Dr. Stephen Lauric. He received his doctorate in education in 2015 from Rossier School and is the CEO and exercise physiologist, for HyBridZone Performance Institute. Welcome, Stephen. So before we get started, I'm going to go through a few questions I'm going to pose to each of you, and then we'll kind of do a round robin if you each have anything you'd like to add on any of those questions. So first, we'll get started, and I'll just ask a general question. Let's start off our discussion by asking each of you to provide some additional background for your career path leading to your current role. And we can get started with Anna. We'll go next to Stephen and then finish up with Catalina.
Hi, I'm Anna. So a little bit of background about how I got to where I am today. So I am a curator for community conservation at the Los Angeles Zoo. And I've always loved animals and nature and learning. And in fact, it's the first memory that I have. And I was introduced to conservation as a career path when I was about 13 years old, as a youth volunteer at the Brookfield Zoo in Chicago, Illinois, which is where I'm from. And I fell in love with this world of informal education and conservation. And it was really my introduction to how powerful education could be. And as I continued working at different zoological and science centers, and I earned my Bachelor's of Science in biology, and I volunteered, I completed internships, I worked multiple jobs, often 7 days a week, to gain enough experience to try to start a career in what is a really competitive field. And I had been at the LA Zoo for about 4 years when I decided that I wanted to earn a master's in teaching at USC. And I chose that program because I wanted to deepen my learning. And expertise in being an educator. And that experience is one that has opened so many doors for me and what led me to my current position at the LAZ right now.
Thank you so much, Anna. That's pretty interesting. Let's go with Stephen. Would you like to share? Steve, you're on mute.
I think that's what Matt said. Somebody would.
You were that one.
Remember. I'm the one. I break the ice. Education to me has always been the path that I've tried to follow. And having come from a background of pharmaceuticals initially and then into the military, the platform that I wanted to lay for myself was one that was informative and intelligent. And I think the best way for me to do that was to go to school, learn how to do something. And for me, that was golf. And by going to golf school, I learned that I found a niche in fitness. But in order to put the two skill sets together, learning how the biomechanics or the kinematic sequence of a golf swing relates to physiology, I had to also have a background in fitness. And so from my undergrad degree on to going to the Golf Academy of America, I understood about the golf swing. I understood that my niche was fitness, but I also needed some brushing up in the fitness area. So I went to the National Academy of Sports Medicine and learned the Optimum Performance Training Platform, which is a way for you to design a program for athletes. You have to understand what limitations they have, how they're strong, how they're weak, and then be able to create a program for them that can help them, some type of corrective exercise. So I thought in my head, what would be the best thing to do? I could partner up fitness with golf instruction, and then you could have a better athlete and a better golfer. And from that, I segued into getting an MBA from Georgetown. But at Georgetown, I wanted to tailor it towards golf and my military background. And I created a program called Troops to Golfers, trying to keep the golf avenue, but also trying to learn the business. But I wanted to extend even further into the education portion because my field is also very competitive. I liken it to a celebrity or Hollywood because you only get one spot for something, or to work with a top athlete, you have to be that one. So for me to stand out and to be able to write curriculum, be able to offer programs that people not only respected, I had to learn more about the pedagogy, the methodology, and the way to design programs, write curriculums that were scholarly as well as informative and worked. And that's how I got into HyBridZone. I'm able to now run a company that works with athletes all over the world. We design programs for different sports organizations all over the world. And by using the knowledge that I got at USC, I'm able to put my passion along with the foundation of education to be able to deliver a product.
Wow, that's truly non-traditional and diverse in nature. Thank you for sharing that. And Catalina, that takes us right into kind of part of your realm. So tell us more about how you got to your career path currently.
I'd like to say that I was as focused as my two, panelists here, but honestly, my road has not always been with that focus. For me, it's been more about being in environments that bring me fulfillment, that challenge me, that help me hone skills that I'm interested in and that I can be of service. I came into education reluctantly. I have 3 disparate degrees, political science with Spanish and French in there. Then I have the master's in public administration, and subsequently with completing my EdD with Rossier. And I just never thought this was going to be it for me. But yeah, I've been in education since my freshman year in college, tutoring at-risk kids, mentoring them. I was a teacher's assistant with LA Unified in the now defunct bilingual education program that was not very well planned, and so I had to be very creative in that environment. I did take the CBEST, and I always thought, I'm going to go to law school. That's the plan. I'm going to go to law school, and I'm going to substitute while I'm pursuing that. And then I went to work at a law firm for a minute, and that was the best thing that happened. Was divine providence that I ended up in that position for a few months. And I said, it's not Perry Mason. It's not what I want to do. So I went and got my master's in public administration, thinking I want to be of service to the city of LA. I'm a native Angelino, so this is what I want to do. And when I finished that, there were some life situations, and I had to start paying off my student loans. And I remember, I have the CBEST. I can do some substituting. And I'm so grateful that I walked into a smaller school district in the northern LA County, where I would do long-term subs. And I had great teachers that I followed their lesson plans, and it was so much fun. And I loved the kids. And so I said, you know what, I'll do this for a little while, but this is not the end goal for me. There's something else. And so whatever I was doing, I was like, what are the skills that I can transfer eventually? What are my transferable skills? Before people were really talking about transferable skills. I've always been in schools where there have been accreditation. So I learned about accreditation and what are those skills. But I kept on, jobs kept on appearing, and I landed in independent schools, first religious schools. And in every school that I landed, first it was by chance, but I had great supervisors, great leadership, great colleagues. So the environment was such that I just couldn't leave, because it was, they were offering me this growth opportunity. The school that I was at the longest as a teacher, they allowed me to be innovative. And so it wasn't about, I always knew that I was going to leave education. That was me. I'm going to leave education the day that I don't enjoy coming to work and being in front of these kids. They deserve something better. And so I have to have that plan B so that I can exit. I have an exit strategy, and I haven't exited. I've just been very blessed with the opportunities, the jobs that I've had, the schools that I've strategically, subsequently, been very strategic about the schools that I have chosen to work at. They're mission driven. The organization chart is such that there's accountability, and that I'm allowed to grow. So it has never been about a position for me. It's been about, this environment, who I am at the time and what they have to offer, and continuing to grow. So I ended up with the Dodgers completely by chance. Chance favors those who are prepared. The job found me, and I said no for about 2 months, because I found out that it was in Arizona, and I live in LA and I'm not moving. But they were very open to negotiating with me and making arrangements so that I could work in Arizona and continue to be a parent here in Los Angeles. And everything that I brought to the table, from Rossier, from the master's in public administration, to my background, I'm firstborn, I'm Latina, all of it came into play with this position with the Dodgers, where I'm in charge of the education programs for the minor league system.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you. One of the things that struck me as you were speaking was this whole notion of transferable skills. So I think we'll get back to that in some of our subsequent questions, but let's forge ahead just a little bit. And I'm going to talk to Anna for a second. Anna, your background in science and your experiences in working in the zoos really seems like it, could be enough to continue on your current career path. Well, can you tell us why you pursued an MAT and how your education background is now an important piece of what your role and what you do?
Yeah, the people that work at zoos and volunteer at zoos are have very dynamic backgrounds and expertise, and I think that zoos really offer very innovative career paths. And working in conservation is a people and a wildlife field. And, when thinking back to when I was 13 years old, going back to that 13-year-old kid, if you would have asked me what I wanted to do with my life, I would have told you that I wanted to save the world. And that's still true. And I wanted to do that through science. And as I moved through that process, I just kept coming back to this idea of, how can I change the world the most? How can I make the most change? And when I think about my experience, my entire life shifted and continues to grow through science because of educators and because of science educators or zoo educators, or any educator that created a safe place for me to be able to explore that passion and see a future in it for myself. And so while I realized, as I was kind of coming to this realization of, the biggest way to make the most change was through education. And so as I looked at my career path, I knew that I had the background, I knew that I had the experience in science, but I knew I needed more. I knew I wanted more to be able to affect that change. And so, I think that education is probably one of the most important parts of my job. And because to save wildlife and develop relationships with nature and inspire conservation leadership, we need to engage, explore, and reflect with people in very relevant ways. And so pursuing the MAT was really valuable for me. And through that experience, I was able to gain tools to think critically and reflect on my own practice as an educator. I gained mentors through the program, like Professor Colleen Rayburn and Professor Marge Proctor, who really helped me to apply what I learned in that program to my specific work at the zoo. And the tools that all of those tools that I gained have also challenged me to think really differently about all of the ways that we work and we learn. And so it's actually helped me be not just a better educator, but a better mentor and a better colleague.
Very good, very good. I can hear the passion in your voice, and I'm sure that some of our listeners out there who have passions who may not be in environmental conservation might want to take note of kind of some of how you use something that was very structured in a different way to influence your current role. So kudos to you. Stephen, your career path has been made possible by your entrepreneurial spirit, which we heard a little bit about, which often plays in the pursuit of, diverse pathways. Sometimes you have to be that out of the box thinker to get to that next place. So with all that, what advice would you give to someone else who's interested in pursuing a similar entrepreneurial role?
You have to be crazy. And I think sometimes genius can come from crazy, but in my particular case, going to USC, getting the EdD on this path was a lonely path. However, my advisors like Dr. Pikus, they shaped and they molded my ideas and the path that I wanted to take into something that was presentable and understandable. And I give them kudos for that. Dr. Brewer and Dr. Data, they helped me take something that a lot of people thought was crazy to do, especially when your classmates are principals, teachers. But I saw a different vision. And as an entrepreneur, I think sometimes you have to see a different vision in order to create something that the world doesn't have. And if they do have it, other like-minded individuals will see the path that you've traveled and want to join you. And I believe that the golf industry is really a complicated sport. It's a sport that a lot of people like to play, but don't quite understand how to play. And education is that platform or that path that people can travel to improve their golf swing. Or in any sport, the biomechanics of how someone moves is directly related to the education level of the person that's training that athlete to improve themselves. But being an entrepreneur is at the base or at the foundation, because you not only have to have the idea that people think is crazy, but you also have to have the business acumen to bring it to light. And that's a complicated balance. And I think entrepreneurs do that regularly. They understand what it takes to build the proper foundation, to get the marketing out, to get the finances, to put your idea before the people that you're presenting it to. But there's a little bit of craziness in that entrepreneurial spirit, but you can make it work as long as you stick to the path and you rely on your mentors, your advisors, and the staff to help you shape that vision that you have.
I can add that just a little bit. You know, we think of entrepreneurship as going out the crazy way and like on your own, which I don't think I could ever do. But you can still be entrepreneurial within the organizations that you work, or choose to work in environments where that part of you can exist. And it's about finding the right work environments where they will allow you to hone that part of of your interests and be entrepreneurial within the organizations that you are currently in, or as you're looking to move forward, that being part of your your questioning when you're interviewing places to work.
Sure. I think one thing that resonates with me about what you both have said is really about authenticity in leadership, wherever you decide that's going to be. You know, sometimes that is creating an entrepreneurial opportunity within an organization or within a particular set of circumstances, or it could be, as Stephen did, is kind of staking out a whole new claim and a whole new industry, altogether, because, he had that vision. So certainly don't proclaim to be a golfer, because if I did, I'd embarrass myself. But I know how hard golf is, and how when you're talking about being that teacher in front of the athlete, bad coaching breeds bad practice, which breeds bad stuff. So I can appreciate the whole pedagogy and the honing your teaching craft in order to get this other piece going. And if I've called you Steve, I apologize. It's in the highest honor. My father's name is Steve. So, no disrespect.
None taken.
Catalina, you're up next. What aspects of your background and experience do you feel best prepared for your current position with the Dodgers?
This is perfectly in tune with Stephen talking about pedagogy and an athlete understanding how they learn, and you can be that guide, because that's definitely I see that every single day. So let me explain a little bit about my job, because it's just so my mom still doesn't understand what I do. So we have an academy. It's player development, so the minor league system. We sign players as young as 16 internationally. And we have an academy in the Dominican Republic where players will stay anywhere from 8 months to 2 years before they transition to Camelback Ranch in Arizona, which is our minor league base. So if you've gone to spring training, that's my office is there. And then we have 5 affiliate teams throughout the United States. And at each level, there has been an aspect of education, but nobody had my position before to bring it all together. And I interact with the world. We have, young men from all of Latin America. We have Asia. We had Australia this past year, and then the pandemic hit. So he literally was here for a day and then went back to Australia. So it's huge. Like, there's so many players, and then there's the coaching staff. And especially with the pandemic, the Zoom came into play, and how do you develop a ball player through Zoom? So I was assisting the coaching staff in basic pedagogy of how do you put a lesson plan together, and so that's been fun. It's been a lot of fun. But as far as what my experience, every single piece of experience professionally, my education, and then what I used to not value. I used to think it had to come on a sheet of paper, what I brought to the table. But in this particular position, the fact that my parents were immigrant, the fact that I was the firstborn in both families to be in the United States, so I was a translator from a very young age, and I saw those gaps. My brothers did not thrive in a school environment. They had gifts other places, and I saw what the deficiency model in education looked like. And so coming to this position, which was completely, foreign to me, it was very comforting. And I said, all of those skills, all of those qualifications, I have those. In over 20 years in education. But definitely my language skills, I speak Spanish and French, so it's not just two languages, but the diversity in approaching a problem from from different perspectives. The fact that I was in work situations where I had to be creative and I was allowed to be innovative. I had started I piloted a program at one of my high schools. The one was at the longest student athlete academic support program. It was a one-woman show, but I saw there was a need there to offer support, kind of like USC has that support for their students. And I was like, why don't we do this in high school, especially for our football players? So being in those environments that let me create, really just, this was perfect. And I love baseball. I just never saw a role for me when I was growing up. Women were not in sports. So that was never something I thought about. This is before Title IX. So to have that open up in front of me and be able to, seize the moment was, and be willing to take the risk. And I've been lucky that I've been in situations where I can take risks. And so taking this huge leap of faith, my family included, that I was going to be gone a lot, was a product of just being in situations where I was allowed to take risks in a safe environment. So it was just like, there was no one thing, it was everything together, and being ready for the unexpected, and being open to not looking at the barriers, but saying, instead of looking at why can't this happen, saying under what circumstances can this happen? Can we make it happen? And let's give it a shot.
That's absolutely fantastic.
If I could chime in, that's one of the really great things that USC did for me. And shout out to the Hawaii cohort. We're a special program, but what I want to say is they gave me the opportunity to follow what I was interested in and to craft the program towards what I was interested in. So it was a risk, but then it wasn't, because I learned from my classmates and also learned from the professors. But USC gave me that flexibility to be able to take that risk. So even though it was a calculated risk, it was fundamentally necessary in order for me to accomplish my goal. And USC backed me.
Anna, any thoughts from you on this one?
I mean, yes, all of that. I was maybe one of the only people in my cohort that wasn't, my plans were different than being in a school environment. And even just being able to be in classrooms and work with teachers who were cool with that and who were really excited to help me on my path was amazing. I still, I think that the relationships that I made through that program and in USC and outside of USC with the teachers that we worked with were amazing and really inspired an entirely different viewpoint for me.
Wow.
If I could add one more thing. So my concentration at USC with my EdD was educational psychology. And because I love the brain just amazes me, and how that goes together with learning is fascinating to me. But it was also the the concentration that seemed to be the most flexible and adaptable to other environments. And for me, opposite than Anna, I was around educators, all day long. And so that also offered me kind of, being in classes with people like Stephen, and I was. And so that was very purposeful. I really enjoy the subject matter, but also it was part of this plan B. If I have to leave the day, I don't, enjoy what I do, where am I going to go with this?
Great. You guys have really started to kind of unpack some of the broader themes that I was going to ask you more specifically about, but that's great because I'm glad that they have some real context and some real, context. But let's kind of dig a little bit deeper around passions and interests of our listeners. So everyone on this panel seems to be doing work that aligns to your personal passions or interests. What advice would you give to anyone looking to pursue a diverse pathway, something that isn't, what we're talking about, but where would you suggest they start?
I think that my advice for this is to be open-minded in what direction you're going to move, because there's not going to be one path, one way to get to where you want to go. And I think that it's important to be innovative in that path. And sometimes, diverse pathways are challenging to navigate, and it can be really, if you have a plan or a planned approach that doesn't work out, it can often be really discouraging, and I think that you can feel lost a lot of the time, and that's okay. I think that what I would say is it's okay to be there and to feel that. And the other part of that is that I would challenge anyone doing that work to not give up on those passions and not give up on finding that path, and to move forward always, because no matter if your path is probably not going to be what you envisioned it to look like, and plans fall apart, and that's okay. And every plan that I've had of how I thought that I was going to get to where I was is never works out. And it's never how I thought I'd get to where I was. And the fun part about that is that the path I ended up taking was never anything I would have imagined or thought. And, I never thought that I, as an informal educator who has a science background, I never expected that going back to school to focus more on a formal classroom and formal education would be the one thing that would make everything open up, And so I think that pursue it because it's worth it. It's hard, but I think that if you're not doing something that you are passionate about or that you absolutely love, then it just changes. It just is, you should just feed your soul in that, follow it always.
Surely. Catalina, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the one position I had that was the most lucrative was the one I least enjoyed. And so it also showed me what I should never do. I was a director of admissions. And I had a very pretty office and such, but that really, although I was in a school environment, I fooled myself in thinking I'm in a school environment, so I'm still in school. It wasn't enough for me. And knowing what I shouldn't do and learning from that. So just like, Anna was saying, there's no direct path. And especially if you're sitting in on this seminar today, on this panel, or listening in, it's because there's a spark there's something, and so you really need to listen to it, whether it's part of your job that you're doing, or you're following it outside of your formal work, but there is something there, and you need to listen to it. There's a reason why you're thinking about what you're thinking. If it's not enough for you, or you have a great idea, you just don't know how to get there, talk to people. For me, it's diversifying your network. I have a fellow alum, Dr. Aries Davis, who says it's not about like this network, it's building relationships. And I truly believe that. So diversifying, I'll just attend things and I meet people and I make connections with people. And I keep that in the back of my mind. So you have to be a lifelong learner. You have to listen to that little nagging, thing inside of you, and follow your interests. And it doesn't necessarily always have to be in a formal work environment. A lot of times what you're doing outside, the connections you're making will lead you into that direction.
Stephen, you have any thoughts?
I think everyone on this distinguished panel has said something that feeds into exactly what I'm about to say. My mom used to always say life was like a scavenger hunt, without sounding like Forrest Gump. Life's like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. Well, the journey that you're on in life, a lot of times, unless you're going to be a medical doctor or an attorney, you tend to pick up knowledge along the way. I think Catalina mentioned throughout her career, she picked up different bits and pieces of information throughout that prepared her for the next phase. And I think that is paramount to being successful and to also adding that diversity to your program, whatever it chooses to be at USC. But I think that your experiences are valuable. They prepare you. You pick up knowledge along the way, and you do have to be a lifelong learner, especially if you're going to be considered an expert in your field, or if you have a terminal degree or a master's degree. Others are going to look at you as the subject matter expert, and you have to continue learning in order to stay sharp with your skills. So I agree with what both have said. You just have to learn along the way, and your path might not be a straight line, but whatever you learn, whatever you pick up, you try to focus it into a direction where you're passionate.
Okay, guys, you've made some really good points, but what about the risk? Like, I could become a teacher, I could become an assistant principal or a coach or a central office person, and I could kind of go through that and I know what that looks like. Aren't there risks? And like, what are the risks that you've had to deal with in venturing off that path?
So I'll start with that. I think the biggest risk, I've taken two big risks. One was in whatever work environment I was on to just come out of my comfort zone and ask. Say, I'm thinking of something, what do you think? Asking the principal or the head of the school. Being in independent schools for the majority of my career gave me that flexibility because there's less bureaucracy to deal with. But just saying, hey, what the heck? If they say no, then I'm in the same place where I started from. So kind of that's always risky because people, we tend to not want to put ourselves out there and feel rejection and feel vulnerable. And if you believe in something strong enough, that go with it. The other big risk I took was entering the EdD program. Never did I think that this was like a doctorate was in my future. I thought there was only the PhD. And so when I discovered the EdD, that was like eye-opening and like, oh, that's possible. That was a huge financial risk. I was in my mid-40s when I embarked on the EdD. I have 2 kids. One was knocking the door of college. And it was a calculated risk though. It was kind of like, okay, this is an investment. And this is now me saying I am committed to pushing myself beyond the next probable step. And so it was a huge risk, like I said, financially for our family. But the understanding was, okay, once you're done, you're not going to settle for the comfort level. So in a way, it helped as an impetus for me to think beyond than I would have had I not done the EdD. The other huge risk was taking this particular job. It was a year ago in April, so the season had already started. A lot of times I'm the only woman in a room full of 100 plus men, and they're all talking about mechanics. I mean, Stephen, the stuff you're talking about, I'm like, oh yeah, I hear about that. But just once again, being in a place where I'm uncomfortable, but apparently that's part of who I am. I'm starting to embrace that a lot more. And there's calculation, right? It's not just you just jump off. When I finished the EdD, I went to the career coaching and at USC, and then I said, I'm going to invest in this. And so I invested in private career coaching, where I was able to identify what I need in a work environment to be fulfilled. And I was actually quite surprised at kind of my top 5. And so that's something that through USC or beyond USC, if you have this nagging feeling or you're like, this is too much, maybe I shouldn't do it now, maybe later, seeking those professionals who help guide you in that direction. And I had a great support. Like I have, my husband was actually once just like, go do it, stop talking about it, go do it. And I have a village around me. So, there's certain things that were in place.
Thank you. Let's go to Stephen next. I apologize.
No
you don't
worries.
look like my dad.
In life, you have a lot of choices you can make. And for me to embark on a path with USC, a lot of people said I shouldn't do it, that, I had an MBA. I was already in the world of business. I was already in the golf space. Why do I need an EdD? And for me, I had to consider the opportunity cost, the investment, and then the return on my investment. And for me, the opportunity cost was, what else could I be doing with this time? Could I be growing the business even more? Could I be building more partnerships? But as I mentioned earlier, the industry that I'm in, I liken to a celebrity. Not that I'm a celebrity, but it's very competitive, and there are only 1 or 2 people to a slot, or to work with an athlete, you're the only one. So you have to have something that sets you apart. So the investment for me was a no-brainer. I think it's an investment in myself. I believe in myself. I have confidence, and I believe that the education will take me to the place where I get that return on the investment. And the risk, again, was the opportunity cost, but in the end, I think that risk becomes an asset for you. I think it becomes a tool that you can use. You can't think of it that way sometimes. You have to stay focused and tread or go along the path that you believe you've set for yourself to be successful. And that's what I continue to do daily. Because if we worry about the risk all the time, a lot of times we won't get things done. And for me, I have to get things done, because if I don't, I won't be successful.
Well said. Anna, I'm going to round this question out with you if you have any additional remarks.
I think that the biggest risk for me is, I'm in a conservation field, which is not a lucrative field at all. And so for me, having spent so much time gaining experience and doing internships or volunteering, or, I had 15 years of, more than that, when I was still trying to get my foot in the door. And for me, when I decided that I wanted to get my MAT to not, to kind of like Stephen said, to really invest in myself and be better, for me, it was a huge financial risk for me, because you always have that fear of, well, what if this doesn't change anything, or what if this doesn't work, or what if this doesn't help? And I think that, for me, that it was a really scary risk. But I sort of just trusted that, you know, if ever, like, whatever was falling into place was the next right step. And I just kept putting trust in that process, and, you know, and just kept being innovative in the ways that I was applying things that I was learning. And, you know, and like, I'm super grateful that that was, you know, that I was able to make that work for me. And so I think, like, you know, for me, I would say, like, you sort of have to be, you have to be fearless in a way, as you're moving through these things, and just trust more in yourself and in your ability to forge that path.
Very well said. Yes, all of you are risk takers in that, and my hat's off to you for following your passions in that way. I'm going to take a brief second to remind our attendees that if you would like to ask our panelists anything specific or have them elaborate on a different question, please submit your questions to the Q&A box. And at this point, we'll keep moving forward. So each of you have, I mean, you've told me a lot so far, and I really appreciate it. What role has mentorship played in terms of you being mentored throughout your career? Let's start with Stephen.
I wouldn't be where I am without people that have taken an interest in me and what I was interested in, whether it was when I was in pharmaceuticals, a professor believing in my ability to move beyond undergrad and go into a sales position. In fact, I had to go to Alabama and sell pharmaceuticals, and then I had to transition from Alabama to New York to sell pharmaceuticals. And both of those environments are completely different. And you might get an hour with a physician in Alabama, but in New York, you don't even get to see the physician. You have to speak to the nurse because the physician doesn't have time. But the mentors that I've had throughout my career always believed in me. Anna said, trusting in yourself. And I think a mentor, a good mentor, sees your potential and helps you define that trust in yourself. With USC, the professors that I had in class, they saw immediately what I was doing was different. However, they didn't let that interfere with seeing that in me, that passion in me, and allowing me to trust myself to help shape what I was doing. So I think along the way, whether it's the beginning of your career or where you're at currently, your mentors are people that believe in you and help shape you into the individual that you would like to be. And sometimes you turn out even better than you thought you could be, because again, they saw something in you, but then they saw that maybe you were missing something and they added that tool to your path.
Thank you. Anna, let's go back to you.
I have had a lot of mentors throughout my life. I mentioned, you know, in the beginning, I had a mentor, Dana, who worked at the Brookfield Zoo and had previously been a science educator. And you know, when I first thought about, I didn't even know what conservation was when I was a teenager, or, you know, a young kid, until they showed up in my life. And I had no idea. I had this really binary vision of what it meant. If I wanted to be in science, it had to be in that, you know, I had to be a doctor or I had to be a lawyer. Like, it just didn't understand that there was this whole world of science that existed. And so for me, you know, that was one critical person was that introduced me to this world of possibilities, and seeing science in a really different way, and seeing education in a really different way too, and helping me to see how I could be a part of that. And it absolutely through, you know, through USC, especially, you know, I mentioned 2 different professors. They just really spent a lot of time helping like guide me through this work. And, you know, at the time I was working with, we had about 500 volunteers and that I was working with to help like teach them how to educate to, you know, what 1.8 million people that we have throughout the year. And so like trying to navigate how is the best way to, you know, to do that. Like they just were super helpful in helping me like focus and align, because it's a really big thing to think about and it can be really overwhelming. And they just helped me focus that into a way that like made sense and that was applicable.
Thank you. Catalina, would you like to round us out?
Sure. I think coming from secondary education for most of my career, I had a lot of informal mentors. So I have like, you know, the formal ones, but was surrounded by colleagues. You know, you have the content, you know, subject matter experts around you. You have scientists, you have, you know, I was in the Catholic school education for a long time, people who had studied, you know, all types of religions and philosophy. So I had all of these people around me just because I was working in high schools. And they were highly educated. I mean, master's degree and beyond. So I had these informal mentors, and we just kind of created little groups where we would talk about just opportunities that were in front of us and coaching each other. So there's that whole informal part where it's, I think a lot of times, especially when you're mid-career, you're thinking of a mentor, somebody who's you know, way above you or who has a certain position, where we, you know, look around you and look at people who are doing things that you admire and use them as not negatively, but you know, talk to them and see why they're so happy, why they're so fulfilled. So there's that whole informal mentorship that I've benefited from because I've been around just really intelligent, passionate people for most of my career. And then I've had my formal mentors, and definitely those came about more directly when I was in the EdD program. Dr. Patricia Toby, our cohort had some vague title about creativity and learning. I didn't even know what that meant, and it was just giving us that space. And she was so good at seeing the best in what I brought to the table because I didn't see it. And so she saw that, and she just took the time to, you know, talk to us. You know, these professors, they've got so much on their plate, but yet they take the time to do that. Dr. Linda Fisher is not long, she retired, same thing. She was just there during the writing process, and she took the time to get to know me and to get to know all of her students. And Dr. Baca, who's also retired, he became a mentor after sitting on my panel for my board for my dissertation, and telling me initially that my subject matter, my topic was not real. And I walked away from there broken. Then I came back and I said, okay, so how do I convince him? Because I think this is real and I think this is something that I need to pursue. He's now a personal friend. So he became a mentor as well, because he took the time to listen to me even when he and I were in completely different planes. So definitely, you know, mentorship in both ways has been tremendously important. I couldn't be here if it weren't for that.
Absolutely. I've had mentors of my own, and that's a whole nother story. Today, we're talking about you. And so we have a few more questions from our audience that I'd really like to get to before we wrap up. So I'm going to read the question, and then we'll see who's most aligned to take it. I love the entrepreneurial mindset of that of each of the panelists conveyed. What specific skills did you learn at USC to cultivate or foster that mindset? Any volunteer?
I'll start.
Sure.
It's inherent. This is how I feel. It's inherent. If you go to USC, there's just something in the air in every single class, even, even the most direct was like learning or motivation. It's just very direct, where that entrepreneurial spirit, those skills are being activated in the classroom, outside of the classroom. The amount of entrepreneurs that come out of the school in general is tremendous. And so the Trojan network, that in itself is fosters that entrepreneur, like, hey, go and get it. Here, we've got this for you. Take advantage of it. And it's just in each of, it's in the air, and in each of the classes where they're, and at least in the EdD program, they're pushing you. They want, like, you are the leaders of tomorrow in education. Don't just learn what we were telling you, take it and then go.
Stephen, I see you got your mic hot.
Yeah, I just think they did a great job of, again, shaping my ideas. So much writing that exists is not scholarly. It's basically an opinion. And it's prevalent in the sports industry more than anything, at least in my experience, where people just write based off of what they see and what they think or what they heard. But while I was at USC, they quickly shaped the way I was writing, which I thought was pretty good, but it could have been a lot better had I had references and citations and understanding different theories and how others have presented the same problem or how you do research. USC really opened my eyes to a better way of writing, a more informed way of writing, and a more informed way of looking at problems and understanding the etiology or where it came from and how you can find the information to support the ideas or the findings that you have. Whereas had I not gone, I probably still would be writing very much opinionated or layman's terms type writing. But the good thing is I'm still pretty much a regular person and I write that way. But at the same time, I still try to do the research so that the information that I put out is backed. But long story short, USC helped me shape how I present things from a more scholarly perspective.
Okay. Anna, any follow-up thoughts or?
Yeah, the only thing, I completely agree with Stephen. And the one thing that I would add that really helped me was in every single class, and I think that one of the fundamental concepts of our way of learning was a practice of reflection. And the idea of, I think that learning how to do that in a constructive way and being able to reflect on not just my practice, but also, what my observations were, my practice, and where I'm going, and being able to do that pause in real time, I think was super helpful for me, because, like anything, if you're doing something that isn't, your way of working or practice isn't successful or working, you don't know that unless you stop and reflect and look through that. And so I think being able to really hone that skill and have it be something that was fostered throughout the entire process was super helpful for me.
Okay, well, thank you. So we have one final question that I'm going to toss out there, and I'll read it out loud, and hopefully you guys can figure out which order you'd like to take it. I was working an unrelated job when I completed my Master's of Ed. And now I'm realizing I don't want to work in a typical college or university setting. Do you have any advice on how to move forward using my education in a different field since I don't have much experience or connections in my network?
So one of the things I think you really need to look at your network and reach out to your network and see who they know. Have conversations with people and just, you know, let them know I'm trying to head in a different direction. Who do you know? I'm working with one of my daughter's friends right now who, you know, it's tough right now to be a graduate, an undergraduate graduate, and you're in a pandemic and there's a hiring freeze. And she has her field is nothing related to mine. But I said, you know, when my daughter said, oh, you know, I feel bad for my friend, this is what's happening. I said, give me her resume and give me, you know, here's some questions. Let me see who I know to, you know, connect them. So I think it's looking at your network from a different lens. Right now, people are very receptive to connecting online more so than they used to. Use LinkedIn. Find, you know, somebody, you know, from the school that you graduated, wherever it was, is there somebody who's working in a field that you're potentially interested in, and ask for an informational kind of conversation. Are there professional groups in something that you're interested in? But just start kind of looking at networking and your network from a different perspective and through a different lens. And ultimately, if there's an opportunity to speak to somebody who does this professionally, like I said, I swear by my career coach. They really clarified things for me.
Anna?
I think that to know if there's a different route that you want to go, I guess I would be interested in knowing what, kind of thinking about back to the passions questions, what are the things that you're passionate about? You know, if I think considering a move forward into a different direction, what would that look, what do you want that to look like? And what are the things that you're passionate about? Because I think that so often we can move in ways that feel sort of they feel logical, or maybe, you know, it makes sense, but if it's not something that you're passionate about moving to, then you're going to be in the same position. Or at least I would be. So I would start there, is, you know, also thinking about what would that look like for you? What do you want that to look like for you?
Nice. Stephen?
Again, I think our panelists, Catalina, Anna, you guys have spoken eloquently about the network, also the passion. You put those two together, and as you just said, Anna, what does that look like for you? And for me, I always knew what it was that I enjoyed doing. I just didn't know how to get there. And LinkedIn was definitely a space that helped me find that, because I would search out all of the people that were from an organization that I was interested in working with, and I'd reach out to them. And it actually started my career off some years ago, because someone on LinkedIn reached out to me to be a master instructor for the National Academy of Sports Medicine. And by doing that, I had access to a wealth of knowledge within my industry. And I accumulated as many certifications as I could, because I wanted to be of value to someone else. So I agree with what Catalina said. You know, you got to reach out to the network. You've got to search, and then add in what Anna said. You got to go after your passion. And then by doing both of those things, you begin to build what it is it looks like for you. And along the way, it may change, but you're still building your network, and you're building your skill sets in different areas. So passion, network, put those together, build your framework.
That is so insightful. All of you have given some key ingredients into making this kind of success gumbo of diverse pathways, right? Because, you know, everybody makes gumbo a little bit different, but if it's good, then you got there. And so I think that would be my my eating analogy, because I really like to eat. But all that being said, I really would like to thank you, and I appreciate the fact that you've shared so deeply about your experiences and about your passions and even some of your vulnerability along your journey. So I think this is a great start for anybody who is really, really saying, now, look, I got to get started. You know, I think you have contact information for each one of these panelists. You have resources at the university, and feel free to contact me as well. And as I wrap this session up, I just want to say that you're each awesome leaders in your own individual fields, and you're going to inspire someone else to do something great in a whole nother realm that you never even thought about. Are there any last words from the panel? Just, you know, you want to drop a little science before you drop the mic? The floor is yours. I don't see any mics get hot, so.
No, I'll say this. I think that whatever your goal is, I think USC has a package for you. And I think that you should be brave enough to believe in yourself and to find that passion for yourself. That may be a risk, but I think ultimately you'll be a happier person. And by the way, I'm not saying it's easy, because none of what I have done has been easy, but it has been worth it. And you have to understand that if you have the right tools, and I think education is that main tool that we all need, I believe you'll get there. It's the law of attraction.
Thank you. Any other final words?
Try to surround yourself by people who are your cheerleaders, who are encouraging. We're our own worst critics at times, and to just choose wisely in who you let in to your to your head and into your heart, because that'll squash sometimes that spark in you. So really, be deliberate in who you're letting in to your mind and to your heart, because if you're going to go in a diverse path, if you're going to take risks, there are times where you need somebody else who's picking you up and pushing you along the way. So that's my little nugget to throw in there at the end.
Thank you. Awesome.
I think the last thing I'd like to add, and something that one of my ways of working, I feel like so often it can be, for me, it can be inhibitive to feel like how do I put this? I think that I would say fail forward. Because I think so much of the time, the ways that we measure success within our society is so skewed and so different for each person. And if I measured anything that I did by how I would succeed at it, I think that I would constantly feel like I was failing. And instead, allowing myself the freedom to fail forward, to get there, and to try, I think has really allowed me a lot of grace and to be gentle with myself in that path.
Thank you so much for those words. I think at this point we are at the end of our time together, and I'd really like to turn this back over to Matt DeGrush.
Thank you, Stefanie, and thank you for skillfully navigating this conversation today as a moderator. And I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Anna, Catalina, and Stephen for providing valuable insight into their incredible and inspiring career journeys. As I mentioned earlier, a recording of today's session will be sent out in the next few days, and I'm excited that those who were unable to attend will also be able to see this valuable conversation and hear your great advice. When you close out of today's webinar, a short survey will appear, so please take a moment to provide feedback on today's session and share your ideas for future virtual programs. Thank you for attending. We hope you will attend a future Leadership Month session. Have a great day, and as always, fight on.